Hey, welcome in. We are back playing Animal Crossing, and today things are gonna get spooky. Behind the pier in Dobie's farm, we're gonna have a swampy area. This front part will be Shep's mushroom farm, and then in the back corner will be a witchy swamp. This is where Puddles and Baabara will be living, and I already have their houses back here, but they're probably gonna be shifting around once I redo the terraforming back here. As you can see, I've been using this area for storing all my extra trees and plants and stuff, so I've got some cleaning up to do before we can get into building. I am running out of places to shove all my messes, so I'm gonna have to finally start cleaning shit up soon and stop hoarding all these extra flowers. Despite that, I am definitely ready to get into the spooky spirit, so let's just start building already. First thing to do is to clear out all these trees and extra plants I've been storing back here. As I've shared before, I'm a bit of a hoarder in this game, and I hate to get rid of my extra plants especially. So as I've been decorating the other parts of my island, I've just been shoving all that stuff back here to deal with later. Well, it's later, and now I have to start sorting all this shit out. After I finish this witchy swamp build, I'll just have Shep's yard and my entrance to do, so I am almost done and need to start buckling down and finally tossing stuff I won't be needing. I don't even like every single flower or tree or bush, and I know I won't use them all on my island, yet for some reason I still feel the need to collect one of every plant variant in the game just in case. I know, it doesn't make a lot of sense, and I do start getting rid of a bunch of extra plants during this build, but it still hurts a little. Do any of you also have an illogical desire to hoard everything in this game, or is this a me issue? Okay, so let me give you a rundown of what my vision is for this area. So in the far left corner and the beach over there, I want there to be some overgrown ruins and ritual areas from some sort of an old druid-like culture or something. Baabara will be our fortune teller, and we'll have her house over in that area. Then through the swamp to the right will be Puddles' home. She's gonna be our potion maker. While I was working on this area, I caught these two ladies hanging out, so I had to stop by to check in. They were already chatting about being neighbors, specifically what bugs they'd want to live with. Both of them were into the idea of rooming with a spider, and I agree, spiders are good housemates, even though they aren't bugs, they're arachnids, but that's besides the point. Still, I loved this whole conversation. Seeing them get all excited about living here and making plans together was so cute. The fact that they're both into spiders also ties perfectly into my vision of them as these naturey witches living in a swamp full of bugs. So yeah, they're gonna be right at home here. Speaking of Puddles, I was originally wanting to get Anka as our other witchy lady with Baabara, but Puddles ended up moving in at some point and has really grown on me. I mean, how could she not though? Look at her. She wears a hot pink silicone bodysuit, her face mask looks like underwear, and based on that context, I think you can tell what the shape of her mouth looks like. She doesn't just look the part of a badass dom either. She's been having fun toying with hearts all over the island since she got here. So although I never really considered her as a possible villager on Shadow Moss, she definitely made her mark, and I don't think I could ever say goodbye to her now. Do any of you have unexpected villagers who you never really thought much about before, but who then surprised you at how much you fell in love with them? Let me know your villager sleeper hits in the comments. Besides being a total baddie, I am also pretty sure Puddles is in love with me. If you've been watching my other build videos for this island, you've seen the signs with me. If not, I'll link the playlist here so you can catch up. But basically, she's been sending me all sorts of gifts and letters and has been just generally flirted with me ever since she moved in. While I was working on this build, she exposed her crush yet again. So I dug up some fossils while I was clearing up this area, so I took them to our boy Blathers to assess. Amazingly, one of them was the final fossil I needed to complete my collection, so that was a great surprise. The rest of my museum isn't even close to being finished, but at least I got my fossil collection completed. Of course, I had to go check out the place and grab a picture with my final fossil, and when I did, I ran into Puddles, so I stopped to say hi. I guess she heard about me finishing the collection and wanted to come congratulate me, which was super sweet of her. She also said that she's been missing me a lot. I know this is just something she's programmed to say when we haven't talked in a while, but that, paired with the moody lighting and her being there for one of my accomplishments, just hit different this time. I don't know, maybe I'm catching a bit of a crush too. That woman just keeps surprising me. Speaking of island romances, I ran into Nan and Chevre a few times during this building process. The first time, they were chatting about going in on a joint gift for Cherry. So it looks like this whole open relationship thing is going a lot better now, and they're all getting along again, which is super great to hear. They asked for my advice, and I told them our rocker lesbian queen would love some iced coffee, obviously. They were excited about that idea and went off to work together to get that all set up for their girl Cherry. Later on, I ran into them planning a romantic evening together. Nan was laying it on heavy, talking about lighting some candles and laying out under the stars while they listened to jazz, eat chocolates, and read romantic things to each other. Like, damn ladies, you are going all out. I was a little worried about them for a while, but now it is safe to say their relationship is back on track and full steam ahead. Good for them. Since we're on the topic of villagers, I also ran into Dobie and Chevre one evening. They were chatting about what they do with 10 billion bells. Dobie said he would ball out and spend a bunch of bells on all the luxuries he could get. This definitely surprised me because I thought he was this humble old farmer, but I guess if you've been living like that your whole life, it probably would be a fun dream to really go all out and live in a totally different way once in a while. Chevre was, of course, a bit more practical and wanted to help others, which I'd probably do too if I had the chance, but my first priority would definitely be to travel. They heard that, but told me to dream even bigger. This was just a silly conversation about riches we will never have, but it was really nice for them to encourage me to treat myself after seeing me run around like a maniac trying to get this build done. It took me so long to get all the DIYs and materials for this build and finish decorating everything. That was on top of being burnt out at work and doing trainings and job hunting, blah blah blah. So I really appreciated these chats with my Animal Crossing pals. I swear, sometimes these villagers just hit you with things at the right time that make you wonder if they really are just pretend characters. I was going through it at the time, and my villagers were all being so cute and wholesome during this whole build. I don't know how, I don't know why, but I definitely appreciated it. If you made it this far and haven't gotten sick of my ramblings yet, why not take a quick sec to click the like button? It lets me know what content to make more of for y'all, helps the channel grow, and it also puts a smile on my face. So go ahead, click the like button. I would really appreciate it. Alright, I should probably get back to talking about the actual build of it. So I've pretty much finished making the abandoned ruins at the back. It took a ton of fiddling to get the combination and the placement of items just right, but I think it came out looking pretty neat in the end. I really like those sprawling ruins I've seen on other players' islands, but I, of course, am trying to fit in way too many themed areas into one island, so my spaces seem to be perpetually smaller than would be ideal. Even though it's a relatively small ruins area, I still think it looks good, and hopefully it'll give you all some encouragement to try out something on your island that you don't think you have enough room for. You may just be surprised about what you can squeeze in and make work. I couldn't really expand the ruins to the right because I wanted to have space for the seaward beach and Puddles' house, so I expanded it out to the rocky area on the left. The little beach in the front of the ruins here will be Baabara's fortune telling spot. Since I ended up putting her house on the cliff I built on the peninsula, it looks out over this whole area that's surrounded by these old temple ruins, so it seemed like the perfect spot for her to do her fortune telling. Okay, so you may be seeing me dumping my mess of extra flowers in front of Shep's house and are thinking, Liz, you said you needed to start buckling down and getting rid of stuff. You're just shoving your mess in a corner again. To that I'd say, yeah, kinda. I swear, I did get rid of at least a handful of extra flowers and crops doing this, but I just couldn't get rid of all of them yet. I ended up using some of these in this build, and I may need more of them for finishing the last few parts of my island, so I have to keep some of them still. Plus, Chef doesn't mind the mess in front of his house. I'm gonna give him a messy yard when I do his place anyway, so it's totally fine for now. I'm sure by the time I'm ready to post my dream address, I'll have this shit sorted out and cleaned up. Probably. Although at this point, I may feel a bit obligated to keep an undecorated patch of beach as my junk zone for all this stuff and call it a day. It'd be funny, but I can't let myself do that. Or could I? While I was decorating, the weather kept getting super gloomy and rainy in game. I had my game set back in time to August because I wanted things to be nice and green for the swamp, but it ended up being rainy and windy a lot. It definitely fit the vibes for this spooky swamp, but building in the rain isn't great to watch in a speed build, so I ended up having to close out and time travel a few times. So if you see wild swings in the weather and the lighting, that's what's going on. I also tried laying down little bits of the pathing here and there while I was decorating, instead of doing it all at the end. It's definitely not as efficient as doing the pathing before putting down items, but it's definitely a step up from my usual process of putting it all off until the end, and then having to pick up everything to paint the pathing and then placing it all back down again. This game has been out for how many years now, and I'm only just now starting to do this? Hey, don't judge me, I'm making some progress. It's slow and suboptimal, but it's still technically progress. Baabara's house is up on this little cliff on the peninsula, so there's very little room to work with for her yard. I'm counting her fortune-telling stand and the little beach behind her house as part of her space though, so I'm okay with her actual yard being a bit small. Since I ran out of inclines I can build on this island, Baabara may be trapped up here from time to time if she spawns there, so I wanted what little room she has to be usable. So I made sure that there's enough space for her to walk around a bit. I also made her a cute little sitting area so she can watch the waves come in across her seaside ritual areas like the witchy queen she is. Moving over to the right side of the swamp, we have Puddles' yard. I wanted her spot to feel a bit more secluded, so I tucked it into these cliffs here and surrounded it with plenty of overgrown greenery. She is a frog, so I gave her her own little magical pond too. Next to her house, I set up her potion selling stand. Pairing that in-game medicine cabinet with the custom code potion shelves and dried herb selling stand worked perfectly together to really make it look like she's running her own little apothecary here. I wanted to incorporate all the different types of crops on my island. I was able to fit in most of them on Dobie's farm, so the last crops to fit in were the pumpkins, and what better place to put a mini pumpkin patch than a witch's herb garden. So I made this flower shape with the in-game dirt paths so that each color has their own special spot. This shape reminds me of those super earthy spiral and keyhole gardens you might see in some crunchy gardener's homestead. I had to incorporate this giant moon into this swamp somewhere, so I put it at the top of the cliff back here and surrounded it with as many trees and plants as I could. I also dug out a little waterfall to funnel into that glowing moss pond in Puddles' yard. Decorating these cliffs back here was a whole lot of me time traveling to get trees to grow, and me getting stuck behind all the items I was placing, so I cut all that out thankfully. Back on the ground level, I put a few pumpkin decorations around Puddles' yard and filled in the empty spaces with weeds and wheat fields. I laid down the swamp pathing off camera because I needed a break from sitting at my computer recording, and plus that part isn't super interesting to watch, so we've skipped ahead of it here. At this point, I fit in about as many trees as I could and have gotten them to grow, so now I'm working on filling in as much of the remaining blank spaces with items that I can. I was hoping to get this build done a lot sooner, but I just could not get my hands on all the mushroom DIYs for the longest time. I tried everything, cycling through Captain Islands for DIYs, trading on Discord servers and on Nookazon, but no luck. After months of all that, and Halloween fast approaching, I finally broke down and figured out how to acquire these things through other means. After my first trip, I was hooked. I spent so many hours grinding for materials, searching for DIYs, trading, etc. for everything on my island up to this point, and still couldn't get everything I needed for this build. Never again. Some grind for things is okay, but for such a massive build that probably cost me hundreds in stones, it gets to a point that it is not fun anymore. If you haven't tried that, maybe look into it. But you didn't hear that from me. Moving on to Baabara's house, I wanted to keep some of the touches of purple, but make the exterior look more like a swampy witch's hut. So I swapped out the door and siding for something more rustic and gave her a lovely dark rose wreath. The interior of her home already gives off dark, moody vibes, so she'll be a perfect fit for our fortune teller. I wanted to stay in line with her original aesthetic, I just had to change up the decor a bit to suit that storyline more. I knew I wanted to use that starry wallpaper and the purple Moroccan sofas, but the rest was a bit of a challenge. I was envisioning her having a table and chairs with a crystal ball and a moody boho sitting area with plenty of plush cushions. I really tried to incorporate that sans flooring, but it just wasn't working. Centering everything with that flooring just didn't leave much room for creating any other areas in the home. So I just couldn't get it to work with what I was going for here, and I ended up swapping it out eventually. I put in a few of those wall partitions to block off that starry wallpaper a bit and make it look more like it's peeking through an open window or doorway. That's where the fortune table will be set up too. It took me forever to figure out the layout of the sitting area and what rug to use. Eventually, I shift the window and fortune telling spot to the left wall, and then finally everything starts falling in place a bit better. As you've probably noticed from my other Animal Crossing builds, I tend to over-clutter spaces, but I'm trying to be a bit better. There was so much I wanted to cram into this little room, but I also wanted to make sure that there was space to walk around in here and that at least some of the seats were accessible, so I reined it in a bit. I wish we had at least a little bit more room to work with in these villager homes, but I guess it's a good challenge to try to decorate such a small space. I think my biggest issue isn't necessarily the size of the room as much as it is with the way items can and can't be placed in this game. I'm used to building in The Sims 4 where I can rotate things, place items off the grid, and turn cheats on so I can scoot objects right up next to each other. Animal Crossing's build tools just are not as powerful. Everything is stuck to the grid, and so many of the objects have so much empty space around them so that you can't place things right up next to each other, even though it may look like there's room. The back left corner by the dresser drove me crazy because there were so many gaps that I couldn't cover up well. I sorted it out eventually, but it was a pain in my ass. For a game that's main gameplay is building for most players, they really didn't optimize it for that function. I mean, I can't run around my island without it lagging. This game is still super fun and I do really like decorating in it. I just hope if the next game has a focus on building again, they improve things a bit more. Now that the main pieces are laid out, I'm just going through and cluttering things up. I put in a bunch of plants and candles and eclectic decor around the place. I changed up the flooring yet again, but that should be the last time. I just think that tile works better for the vibes I was going for here. To set the mood, I went ahead and turned off the lights, and instead I used the candles and lamps I hung around to light up the room. On the ceiling, I used some of those festival lanterns that I customized with the same pattern I used on Baabara's fortune teller stand. I also threw up some drapery, Moroccan lanterns, and vines. At first, I went a bit overboard on the ceiling decorations, I'll admit that. So I spent some time toning it down a bit at the end, and I think I'm able to get it looking less overwhelming and more refined eclectic. Last thing was to clutter up these walls. Again, I went a little overboard with it, and I wound up editing things down a bit at the end. There's just so many things that would work so well in here, and I love the boho, witchy vibes we've got going on in here that I over-decorated a bit. That's pretty much it for Baabara's house. I'm just finishing up the decor and then I'll go back through and pare things down to be a more reasonable level. We'll take a look at the final results in the tour at the end though, so for now though, let's go over to Puddles' house. The exterior of her original house was too cutesy for this swamp. I ended up giving her the darker version of the straw roof she already had, used the same siding as I put on Baabara's house, and hung up a glowing moss wreath on her fancy new door. Now it is definitely looking more like a backwater apothecary shack. Her interior is fun. I know she's a bit of a party girl, but it just doesn't work with her new witchy lifestyle, so it all had to go. I'm sure she'll still be throwing some interesting parties in her new house with all her mysterious concoctions. The vibes will just be much spookier now. Yet again, the wallpaper and flooring threw me for a bit of a loop. I tried utilizing that sans flooring again, as well as that candle wallpaper, but they just weren't working for me in here either, so I swapped those out. I wanted it to be really lush and swampy in here with lots of greens and pinks. Puddles will be our potion maker, so I put in plenty of stuff in here for her to use when cooking up her concoctions. There's so much moss and mushrooms and steam from things bubbling away in all the pots. This is the perfect, warm, steamy home for a little frog like Puddles. I'm sure she'll also be happy because with all this moisture, her skin is going to be looking better than ever, which will be all the better for her to catch looks and break hearts with. To clutter up all these surfaces, I put in a bunch of plants everywhere. I figured they'd act as the different herbs and stuff she uses to make all her tinctures and potions. We don't have a great potion brewing item in the game, so to make do, I use these science beakers and coffee siphon. If you look closely, they are clearly not potions, but they are oddly shaped glass bottles with stuff bubbling away in them, so they're close enough. I didn't want this whole place to be just for her work, so I made sure to include a spot for relaxing. On the left wall, I made a mini sitting area for her. She, of course, has the vine swinging chair and a little pink poof. I wanted to include the froggy chair, but I just didn't have room to fit it in. I did put some books over here so she can curl up and read when she wants to put up her feet and relax after a long day of witchery. The next thing to do was to move on to the wall decor. The wall shelf with bottles was a perfect stand-in for potion bottles, so I put that over the covered counter to look like they were stacked on top of it. I put in plenty of shelves and more plants and herbs for using in potions. On the ceiling, I put in a bunch of vines and glowing moss to play into the overgrown, swampy feel of this place even more. It took me a while to get that all decorated, so I'll skip showing that in the speed build part here. Instead, let's go ahead and jump into the game so we can get the full spooky experience of this witchy swamp. Here we are outside Chep's house. I swear, we will clean this all up for him next time. Ignoring that mess, let's go explore the swamp. I time traveled a bunch so we could have some nice gloomy weather to really set the mood while we walk through this area. Star fragments, glowing moss, and purple glowing ponds really help make this place look more magical than a typical swamp. I absolutely love all the bug models from Flick, so I hid some of those around in here too. At the back we have our abandoned ruins. These are definitely smaller than most builds I've seen with these items, but I think it looks really cool still and it works perfectly in this space. Going through this side takes us back into Red's secret beach. It's cluttered and overgrown, but still accessible. Over on the left side of the ruins is the fortune-telling area. Baabara's got her stand set up against the archway here, and then on the little beach at the back, she can perform her readings and seances and stuff. Up on the seaside cliff is her home. I put a ladder up to it so it's accessible. Baabara won't actually use it, unfortunately, but we can at least. On the beaches in the front of her home, we have some more old ruins where different rituals were performed. Around this stone tablet, I reused some of those crop circle designs from our UFO landing site over in Roswell's cryptid campsite. Maybe there's some sort of connection there. On the rocks here, I put this Capricorn statue for when you're just in the mood to dabble in a little Satanism. Praise be, rock on, dude. Alright, let's head over to the opposite side of the swamp now. So taking a right when you enter will bring you over to Puddles' yard. At the front, she has her garden with all the different pumpkins because of course she does. Next to her home is her little apothecary selling stand for all the villagers to come under the cover of night to buy their secret remedies and potions. Taking a peek up at the cliffs here, there is our giant moon. I bet these ladies cast some sort of spell to ensure this area has a full moon at all times. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look inside now. Here is Puddles' finished potion hut. This place is so lush and green with the perfect pops of hot pink, and it suits her so well. All the steam would feel so warm and cozy at first, but I bet it'd get to be a bit suffocating at times. It would probably smell like a jungle meets an herb or tea shop in here. Like it's teetering on the edge of the smell being overwhelming in a bad way, but also in an amazing way. You know, I think our Dom Puddles would actually relish in the fact that her place causes people to be in a bit of a turmoil as to whether they love it or hate it. Perfect. Last up, we have our fortune teller Baabara's home. This room definitely took me the most time and frustration to decorate, but I really like how it turned out. This space is so dark and moody while also being magical and classy at the same time, just like our girl Baabara. Imagine hanging out in here, having your fortune told, or doing a seance. The vibes would be immaculate. I don't believe in all that stuff, but Baabara, you can take all my bells just so I can keep coming back and hanging out in here. I love it. Okay, that is the whole build. This probably ended up being my most challenging build yet, just because of the sheer amount of time it took me to gather all the materials and prep everything, but it was all worth it in the end. This witchy swamp is the perfect spot to get all my spooky season vibes any time of year. I hope I've inspired you all to add a little mystique, a little spookiness into your game too. So definitely let me know what you think of this build in the comments. Don't forget to send a like my way if you enjoyed this video, it is super helpful. Remember, be kind to yourself today, and I'll see you next time.